Hello to all viewers, and thank you for being here. Please write in the comments where you are watching this video from. As a male storyteller, it is important for me to see your geography and feel how far our stories reach. I wish you pleasant listening and a peaceful time with me. He was found near a forest spring, almost without strength. The mud on his cloak had dried, there were marks from ropes on his skin, and his breathing was labored. Not long ago, his face was on tapestries and coins, but now no one would recognize him in this frozen man. A hermit monk stopped on the path, lifted the fugitive by the shoulders, and took him to a tiny cell that smelled of dried wormwood, wet brushwood, and warm hearthstone. Thus began what would later be called sainthood. Before his exile, he had been a prince. In the palace, he had tried to stop a new war. He secretly sent a letter to the ambassadors of a neighboring power with a request for peace and concessions. He hoped to buy time, save people, and preserve grain reserves. The letter was intercepted, his actions offended the council, and his stepbrother, who had become king, declared him a traitor. He was stripped of his title and coat of arms, and ordered to leave and never return. He went into the forest so as not to drag blood behind him. The hermit asked no questions. He boiled water, washed the fugitive's hands, moved a bowl of soup closer, and laid a clean cloth on the bench. In the morning he nodded toward the leaking corner of the roof. The fugitive got up, removed the rotten slats, replaced the crown, reinforced the gutter, and covered the cracks with moss. His hands remembered the movements of the stable and the palace carpenter's workshop, where he had once only watched. By noon, the roof had stopped leaking. The hermit nodded briefly and gave him a larger bowl. Thus, the former prince became a quiet craftsman in this cell. The nearest village lived in poverty and stubbornness. People argued over water, quarreled over boundaries, and made peace because of winter. They said that the hermit knew how to separate, heal, and never took money, only bread or a pinch of salt. He kept a small board with charcoal marks, who he had helped and who had promised to help further. He called it order, not mercy. The quiet master gradually entered into this order. He repaired warped doors for widows, re-roofed houses, fixed bolts, put loose benches back in place in the common house, and taught people how to boil water and ventilate their homes. He made them put steps by the well so that mud would not be spread around the yard. At first they grumbled, then they got used to it. They called him quiet because he did more than he explained. There was a boy in the village who stuttered. Every word stuck in his throat like an invisible stone. They teased him, pushed him around, and hid his knapsack. He gravitated toward the hermit, because the hermit never laughed at him for no reason. The hermit gave him simple tasks: to bring herbs, to pick up a bowl, to pass on a sign. One day the quiet master replaced one heavy bag with two smaller ones and said with a gesture that it was easier for people to be kind when they did not see the extra weight. The boy did not understand everything, but he nodded and became more diligent. In the fall, a merchant came with salt. The horse nodded with fatigue, the apprentices dragged the bags, and a thin seal with a starfish hung from the merchant's belt. He left salt and barrels of water at the cell and explained that the hermit had once rescued his children from a fire, and that a debt must be repaid with deeds. He did not like loud thanks and left. The quiet master noticed the seal. In the palace archives, such seals were placed on letters about trading rights and salt warehouses. He remembered the pattern and the small notches on the edges. In the evening, the hermit hummed a simple lullaby. In the third motif, the melody stumbled on one note. The quiet master felt something familiar. As a child, he had been sung the same melody, and it had stumbled in the same way. He dismissed the thought so as not to get confused in his memory. The dampness made itself felt. The quiet master convinced the men to dig drainage ditches and make clay dams so that the water would flow into the lowlands instead of the courtyard. He drew lines on the ground, showed the heights, and carefully distributed the work. When the water receded, the village breathed a sigh of relief. They began to leave bread and dried pears on the windowsill of the cell. Rumors spread quickly. Within the city walls, people discussed whether someone was hiding the prince. They decided to catch him quietly. One day, a long box was left at the cell, sealed with the same starfish symbol, but the lines in the imprint did not go from top to bottom, as they should, but from left to right. The stuttering boy recognized the crooked seal. He had once helped a cart driver who complained about other people's seals and taught him that an incorrect hand was immediately noticeable. The hermit ordered that the box not be touched until dark. At night, they opened it. Inside were shackles, a net with weights, and a list of names of guards who were ordered to capture the traitor by dawn. Next to it was a promise of a reward. The usual everyday delivery turned into a threat. The quiet master did not run away alone. He laid out the iron on the earthen floor so that it would not clank, sent the boy to the chapel to ask for the rare, heavy ringing of the bell, a sign not of fire, but of an attack. He led the widows and children to the marshy mounds, which he had marked in advance with a knife. The hermit lit the stove, prepared bandages, and sorted out the infusions. The soldiers arrived before dawn, ransacked the cell, but left empty-handed and angry. After that, there was less silence and more clarity. The cell, the cauldron, and the supply of flax were moved to the leper's house. There, they organized queues. A witness stone was placed at the door. Everyone who brought bread placed their palm on it and named their contribution. There was less envy. The quiet master introduced order. In the morning, children in the week in the afternoon, workers in the evening, everyone else. He kept track of numbers and supplies in his head, monitored clean water, and made sure the cloth was boiled, aired, and dried. The girl with sore wrists learned to make bandages better than any city workshop. People stopped spitting in line. The merchant turned out to be more than just a casual acquaintance. He offered to take them to the city. He said he knew an old water channel where the stone would give way if you knew where to look. He promised to distract the guards at the gate in the morning with a trade dispute. He was an unexpected benefactor who had supplies, connections, and influence at the gate. He turned the story around with one decision. Before leaving, the hermit took a bone comb with tiny lion heads out of a stone box. Each had a chip on the right ear. Such combs were once kept in the children's treasury. The quiet master noticed the item and did not ask any questions. The same night, the hermit hummed the same lullaby with the same stumbling note. The connection between the melody and the comb grew stronger, but the words had not yet come. They entered the city before dawn. Wet straw lay on the square by the cathedral, and stacked firewood by the casemate. The crowd wanted a spectacle. The quiet master went to the chancellor's house. He found a book of records showing how, under the guise of a tax, the price of grain was being raised. He found a copy of his letter with the authentic seal of the deceased king and a short note in the chancellor's handwriting. The letter could be used against the author, if necessary. He understood how his impulse had been turned into leverage, but the guilt did not disappear. He had promised something he had no right to dispose of. The captain of the guard stood on the steps of the cathedral. Once, The hermit had carried his children out of a fire. The captain recognized the old man. He asked what he wanted. The hermit asked that the ropes be removed from the woman and 2 boys who were being held below for stealing loaves of bread. The captain gave the order and remained nearby. The crowd buzzed. Someone pointed at the quiet master. Someone threw a stone. The stone fell nearby. The quiet master climbed the steps and admitted his guilt. He said that he had written the letter for the sake of peace and grain, that he had no right to make such a decision, that he was ready for punishment, but asked that those who had nothing to do with his mistake be left alone. He spoke calmly without shouting. The captain ordered the wood to be removed from the casemate, and the hungry to be fed first. The merchant paid for the grain, made the servants light the boilers and pour it out. The smoke rose, and the rumbling softened. And at that moment, the fire alarm rang. A house caught fire in the lower quarter. The wind blew toward the old roofs. People ran with buckets. The quiet master ran with the captain and the merchant. The hermit took water and bandages, and the stuttering boy stayed by the bell to keep the rhythm of the strikes and direct people. The flames spread along the beams. The quiet master pulled out the children, covered them with his cloak, and returned again because he heard coughing from inside. The roof collapsed. A beam hit his shoulders, and the captain and his men pried it up with a crowbar. The quiet master inhaled thick smoke. They carried him to the stone slabs of the cathedral. The hermit placed a bone comb in his palm and laid his own next to it, with the same chip on the right ear. He made it clear with a sign, a touch to his temple, and the same lame motif, that many years ago he had rescued a boy of princely blood from the fire and had borne a hidden responsibility for him ever since. The hidden kinship manifested itself without loud words. Identical combs, the same lullaby, the same memory of a false note. The quiet master understood and closed his eyes. They buried him without trumpets. A stove, a mug of water, bread, people who ate from his pots. The merchant paid for the stone. The captain stood aside. The hermit hummed a lullaby without the last motif. The stuttering boy rang the bell evenly without haste. People began to say that it was easier to breathe by the stove. The hermit did not encourage talk of miracles. He encouraged order. Those who ate washed the pot. Those who warmed themselves brought firewood. Those who received gave to others. Thus began the memory of the saint without a coat of arms. After that, everything was based on deeds. The merchant, who turned out to be an unexpected benefactor, joined the council and ensured that the cauldrons became the responsibility of the city. He showed the figures: fewer fights, fewer night fires, less spending on guards. He simply said that a bowl of food was cheaper than blood. The captain established a rule: food and water must be provided before trial. He was criticized by those who loved order without people, but he remained silent and stayed the course. The leper colony became a center not of pity but of organization. There they learned to boil, ventilate, and count. The stuttering boy grew up to be the key keeper. He was responsible for the warehouses, seals, and queues. His voice remained uneven, but it became firm. He kept track of the seals and immediately raised the alarm if the seal was not in the right place. They stopped teasing him. Those who kept order were not laughed at by the cauldrons. He became an unsung hero until one harsh winter showed that hundreds depended on his calmness. Then he kept the lines in order, prevented the distribution from falling apart, closed the doors on time, and opened them for those who should enter first. The city remembered this better than any speech. The council tried to restore fear with stories that the saint was a convenient invention. The merchant put the accounting book on the table, the captain put the report on the quiet nights, and the key-keeper put the table of seals and deliveries. They argued less, debated as usual, but did not back down from their decisions. The hermit brought small boards with markings to the monastery. Who had been helped, who had helped others, how the street had changed. The monks copied them down briefly and clearly without gold around the edges, and taught the young brothers that order in times of trouble is maintained not with a whip, but with a bowl, a bandage, and a cue. In the spring, extortionists appeared on the road to the sea under foreign cloaks. The city did not send swordsmen. The city sent 40 shovels, 6 crowbars, 2 cauldrons, and a key-keeper with a record board. In one day they deepened the fords and strengthened the shore. The caravans went around, and the extortionists left. People praised, not strength, but organization. At the end of each story, someone added that the one lying under the slab would have done the same. Sometimes anonymous packages were left at the doors of the lepers' houses. After the one where they found the caustic powder, a rule was introduced. Everything without a seal should be opened behind the wall near the ash pit. This saved them from trouble several times. Everyday trifles often turned into thrillers, but the rules allowed them to avert the threat in advance. The town got used to the idea that a bowl of soup was as much a part of their protection as the wall. The quarrels did not disappear, but they became shorter. The seals were not mixed up in the warehouse. Knives were pulled out less often at the market. In a tiny chapel next to the stove, an oak frame with a bone comb was hung on the wall. Next to it was an empty frame to remind people that not every connection needs to be made public. The hermit approved. Kinship in business is often more important than blood. He was getting old, but he continued to go from task to task, humming the same lullaby with the same uneven note, as a sign that in any story there's room for confession and a new step. His stepbrother, the king, kept his distance. His messenger checked the city and returned with a quiet report. There were fewer fights, fewer fires, less spending on guards, more food in the pots, more silence. The king pretended not to care, but ordered that the bowls in the leper's house be left untouched. Silence proved more valuable to him than pride. Years became a habit. The merchant grew old, but he did not abandon the roads, led caravans, and taught young people that debts are paid with work. The captain turned gray, but kept the rule of bread and water before the court. The key-keeper died at his post with a bunch of keys and a wooden token carved with a starfish hanging from his belt. His plaque was carved with a short inscription: "A man who listened and did not confuse seals." The key-keeper's apprentice took over the board and the frequency of the knocks. He explained why the third part of the melody always stumbles. It is easier to remember the moment when a person stops, admits guilt, and makes a new decision. The monastery gathered evidence: marks on bread, lists of cues, information about clean water and the reduction of diseases. Based on these signs, the quiet master was recognized as a saint, not for gold, not for visible miracles, but for verifiable benefits. People went to the stove, not for the legend, but for guidance. How to queue, how to store supplies, how to check the seal, where to take a parcel without a stamp, how to prepare water and bandages, how to talk to a crowd without shouting. They left calmer than when they came. Sometimes visitors asked why the saint's name was not on the stone. They were told that he gave up his name when he recognized his mistake, and in return left behind an order that works without him. They were told that the hermit monk made him a saint, not with words, but with a sequence of deeds. That the merchant who invested money and effort became an unexpected benefactor. That the captain valued life over spectacle. That the stuttering boy proved that hidden talent is stronger than status when it comes to attention and accuracy. That the village learned not to wait for the whip, but to stick to the cue, the bowl, and clean water. That everyday parcels are sometimes more dangerous than swords, and that a verification procedure was invented for them. That the hidden kinship between the hermit and the prince did not change the rules of the city, but only explained the uneven note in the lullaby and the identical chips on the combs. When the hermit died, the monks placed a comb in a box next to a small board with a short phrase, "Memory is preserved by action." The merchant put a shelf for new marks in the leper's house. The captain stopped coming to the square, shouting. He just stood by the stove sometimes and remembered the day when the firewood was removed and the boilers were installed. The key-keeper's apprentice rang the bell evenly, as his mentor had taught him. People got used to this sound. It was a reminder that their city was held together not by fear, but by order. And if anyone tried to turn the crowd back to the old merriment of executions, they were answered with a counting, a bowl, and a door opened in turn. If extortionists stood in the road, a new groove and footbridges appeared there in the morning. If an unmarked box was brought in, it was opened at the ash pit. If someone stole the seal, the key-keeper noticed the uneven line and raised the alarm. If a fight broke out in the queue, it was quelled, not with a stick, but with the rhythm of the supply and a list on a board. So the former prince, exiled for his letter, became a saint, not because his mistakes disappeared, but because they were turned into a clear order. There are no miracles in this story, beyond boiled water and a properly organized queue, but that's what saved more lives than any banners. And if you are asked how the story at the Forest Spring ended, the answer is simple. It did not end. It turned into a habit of living so that tomorrow would be a little easier than yesterday. And on a difficult day, everyone had a bowl, a crowbar, and a reliable seal.